A wealthy business mogul was having dinner at an upscale restaurant when a young child left something on his napkin. It brought him to tears. Before we begin this tale, share in the comments where you're following along from. Let's dive into the story. Marcus Thornfield drummed his fingers rhythmically against his champagne flute, half listening to the investment advisors who were desperately trying to impress him. At 44, the founder and CEO of Thornfield Industries had perfected the skill of looking attentive, while his thoughts raced through strategic calculations. The soft candlelight of Azure Restaurant flickered across the eager faces surrounding his table. Marcus's entire existence operated like clockwork. Each choice was deliberate, every gamble carefully assessed. His business empire had grown from this methodical approach. The server moved gracefully, clearing away his starter dish. As the plate was lifted, Marcus spotted something beneath it. A small piece of paper, folded carefully. Intrigued, he retrieved it while maintaining his practiced expression of interest. "One moment," he murmured, opening it discreetly under the table. The handwriting was clearly that of a child, yet surprisingly legible. "My great-aunt Catherine is very sick. She told me you're my dad. We're staying at Riverside Children's Home. Please visit us before she leaves forever." Marcus's fingers went rigid. The chatter around him dissolved into background noise. Catherine, that name belonged to Sarah, his college sweetheart from over a decade past. Their romance had been intense until his business ventures consumed his every waking moment. He had prioritized success over affection, never glancing backward. "Mr. Thornfield, regarding those quarterly projections." Marcus rose suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. "I must go." Family situation. The phrase felt strange on his tongue. Family. He'd never used that reason before. 30 minutes later, his Mercedes pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Children's Home, a modest building with warm light spilling from its windows into the evening darkness. Marcus remained motionless, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Inside, a weary-looking administrator guided him through corridors to a small meeting room. "She's been waiting for you," the director explained. "Catherine made us promise to contact you if something happened." Marcus's voice was strained. "Where is she now?" The child who walked in moments later made Marcus's world stop. 9 years old, with auburn hair framing a gentle face. But her eyes, startlingly green and intense, took his breath away. They were unmistakably his own eyes gazing back at him. She lifted her small arm, revealing a distinctive star-shaped birthmark, identical to one on his wrist. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Emma." The business empire builder, the man who commanded corporate meetings with a simple look, found himself without words. In that instant, Marcus Thornfield understood that all his wealth meant absolutely nothing compared to this small girl standing before him, the daughter whose existence he'd never suspected. Marcus stared at Emma, his mind struggling to comprehend the reality facing him. The cramped office at Riverside Children's Home seemed to close in around them, as the director fidgeted nervously in her seat. "I realize this comes as quite a surprise, Mr. Thornfield," she said, breaking the heavy silence. "Would you prefer some privacy with Emma?" Marcus nodded silently, unable to look away from the girl's face. The director stepped out quietly, closing the door behind her. "How did you locate me?" he finally managed to ask. Emma's tiny fingers played with the edge of her worn pink cardigan. "Great-aunt Catherine saved a folder with your business cards and magazine articles. She showed me your photo before she—" Her voice trembled slightly. "Before she became really ill." Marcus lowered himself into a chair, positioning himself at her eye level. His daughter. The idea still seemed impossible to accept. "Sarah never informed me about you," he said, the words heavy with remorse and a trace of frustration. "Why didn't she reach out?" Emma shrugged, her eyes so disturbingly similar to his own, studying him intently. "Mom explained that you were creating important businesses, that you had your own path." She paused. "She mentioned that someday, when I was older, I could choose whether to look for you." Marcus felt a sharp ache in his chest. Sarah had shielded him from responsibility while bearing the burden alone. It was exactly like her, selfless even toward the man who had left her behind. "When did your great-aunt pass?" he asked gently. "4 days ago," Emma replied with the matter-of-fact tone children use when discussing heartbreaking topics. "She tried to stay as long as possible." The director returned carrying a manila folder. "Sarah Mitchell listed you as Emma's father on official documents, though she never sought legal recognition or financial assistance." She slid several papers across the desk. "These are custody forms. Naturally, we'll need official paternity confirmation, though the resemblance is quite striking." Marcus barely registered her words. His mind was calculating with the same precision he applied to mergers. Catherine had been gone 4 days. Emma had been alone in an institution for 4 days. His child had been grieving her great-aunt with no family for comfort. "I want to bring her home," he declared suddenly. "This evening." The director looked surprised. "Mr. Thornfield, while I understand your eagerness, there are protocols." "I have a legal team that can handle any protocols," Marcus interrupted, "but I refuse to leave my daughter here for another night." As they approached his Mercedes, Emma hesitated. "Is everything all right?" Marcus asked. She looked up at him, uncertainty clear in her expression. "Are you certain you want me?" The question caught him completely off guard, so direct and heartbreaking in its innocence. Marcus knelt down, meeting her gaze. "Emma," he said, selecting his words thoughtfully, "I had no knowledge of your existence until this evening. I have absolutely no experience being a father." He took a deep breath. "But absolutely, I want you. We'll learn together." For the first time, a hint of a smile touched her lips. "All right," she said simply, and climbed into the car. Marcus's penthouse sprawled across the top 3 floors of an elegant downtown tower, a testament to contemporary luxury and careful design. Every piece of art, every fixture had been deliberately chosen to communicate wealth and refinement. Nothing was misplaced. Nothing served no purpose until this moment. As the elevator opened directly into his entrance hall, Marcus watched Emma absorb her new surroundings. Her eyes widened at the panoramic windows displaying the sparkling cityscape. The sleek furnishings in blacks and whites, the modern sculptures that cost more than most people's cars. "This is your home?" she asked, her voice tiny in the expansive space. "Yes," Marcus answered, suddenly viewing his residence through fresh eyes. There were no family photos, no personal mementos, nothing suggesting a life beyond commerce. Emma held her small backpack closer, looking impossibly small against his carefully crafted environment. "Let me show you where you'll stay," he said, leading her down a hallway. The spare bedroom was as impersonal as the rest of the penthouse, all sharp angles and muted colors. Marcus switched on the lights, revealing a queen-sized bed that would engulf Emma's small form, and windows offering the same spectacular view as the main room. "It's quite large," Emma observed, placing her backpack gently on the carpet. "We'll personalize it tomorrow," Marcus promised, realizing he had no concept of what a child's bedroom should contain. "Do you need assistance unpacking?" She shook her head. "I don't own very much." The statement lingered between them, highlighting the enormous differences in their experiences. His life of abundance, hers of careful economy. In the kitchen, Marcus examined his refrigerator contents. Premium wine, expensive takeout leftovers, and little else suitable for a child. He wasn't certain what children preferred to eat. After an uncomfortable pause, he retrieved his phone. "I'll order dinner." "What sounds good to you?" "Whatever you choose is fine," Emma answered, settling carefully on a bar stool, her feet swinging above the ground. They shared Chinese food at his dining table, which had never hosted an actual family dinner. Marcus observed Emma carefully, portion her food into neat pieces, her etiquette remarkably refined for a 9-year-old. "Did your mother teach you those manners?" he asked immediately, regretting the casual mention of Sarah. Emma nodded. "Mom always said politeness matters more than expensive possessions." The simple wisdom affected Marcus profoundly. Sarah had always valued genuineness over appearances. Later, as Marcus stood in the doorway watching Emma organize her few belongings, some clothing, a threadbare stuffed rabbit, and a framed photograph of Sarah, he felt something unfamiliar constricting in his chest. For a man who had spent his adult life in complete control, who had built a fortune on calculated choices, Marcus Thornfield had just made the most spontaneous decision of his existence, and he had no idea what the future held. Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts kept returning to the day's revelations. The note, the children's home, those green eyes that reflected his own. After hours of restlessness, he abandoned sleep and wandered to his study, a room filled with achievement awards and industry publications. In the bottom drawer of his mahogany desk, secured away for years, sat a box he'd never quite managed to discard. He paused before opening it, knowing the contents would reopen emotional wounds he'd convinced himself had scarred over. Inside lay the fragments of his past with Sarah. Movie stubs, handwritten letters, a watercolor portrait she'd painted of him smiling, something he seldom did anymore. Marcus lifted a faded photograph. Sarah at the lake, her auburn hair dancing in the breeze, her expression radiant. She had embodied joy itself, her creative spirit so unlike his analytical nature. "You should have contacted me," he whispered to the image, frustration mixing with sorrow. "She's been alone for 4 days, Sarah." A gentle sound from the doorway interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood there in oversized sleepwear that his assistant had hurriedly purchased, her hair tousled from sleep. "I apologize," she said quickly. "I heard something." Marcus hastily shut the box. "It's fine. Couldn't sleep either." She shook her head, her gaze falling on the photograph he still held. "That's Mom." "Yes," Marcus said quietly. "From many years ago." Emma entered the room hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome. She settled onto the leather couch facing his desk. "She kept a picture of you beside her bed, too." Something twisted in Marcus's chest. "She did?" "Mom said you had important work to do, that you were building something significant." Her fingers traced patterns on the leather. "She told me I inherited your eyes." Marcus studied her face, the delicate features that were clearly Sarah's, but those eyes undeniably his own. What other traits had he passed to this child he'd never known? His determination, his stubborn streak. "Did she—" he began uncertainly. "Did she speak of me often?" Emma considered this carefully. "Sometimes. Usually when I asked. She wasn't angry with you, if that's what you're wondering. But she should have been," Marcus thought. She had every reason to resent him. "She said you'd make a wonderful father eventually," Emma continued, "when the time was right." The words felt like a physical blow. Had Sarah sensed her illness approaching? Had she somehow arranged this meeting from beyond, offering him one final opportunity to prove her faith justified? "It's getting late," he said gently, unable to process the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "You should try to rest." Emma nodded and slipped off the couch. At the doorway she stopped. "Marcus?" Yes? I'm happy I found you. After she left, Marcus sat motionless, the photograph still in his hand. For a man who prided himself on never missing business opportunities, he'd missed the most crucial one of all, being present for Sarah and their daughter. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow he would start making amends. Morning brought the harsh realization that Marcus Thornfield, expert in million-dollar negotiations, had absolutely no understanding of how to care for a 9-year-old girl. He stood in his kitchen, staring into his refrigerator as if it might magically produce an appropriate breakfast. "Do you have any oatmeal?" Emma asked, appearing beside him wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair pulled back in a slightly crooked ponytail. Marcus closed the refrigerator door. "I don't believe so. I typically just drink coffee." Emma nodded seriously, as if this confirmed something she'd already guessed about him. "Mom used to say you can't function properly without breakfast." The innocent observation, so casually delivered, made his chest tighten. How many other small insights had Sarah shared about him? "She was correct," he acknowledged. "Let's go out for breakfast, and then we need to get you some necessities." 2 hours later, they were navigating through a department store. A completely alien experience for Marcus. He usually had personal assistants handle such routine tasks. Now, surrounded by children's clothing, he felt strangely out of his element. "Choose whatever appeals to you," he said, gesturing broadly around them. Emma looked up at him uncertainly. "Really anything?" "Absolutely." She chewed her lip thoughtfully, then moved carefully through the displays, occasionally touching a fabric or examining a design, but selecting nothing. After several minutes of this cautious browsing, Marcus recognized the issue. "Emma," he said gently, kneeling to her level, "you don't need to worry about prices." She shifted uncomfortably. "Mom always taught me to look at price tags first." Another stark reminder of their different realities. While he'd been accumulating fortune, Sarah had been teaching their daughter financial responsibility. "That was wise advice," he acknowledged, "but today is special." These are necessities, not luxuries. Gradually, Emma began making selections, practical choices mostly, nothing extravagant. She consulted with him before each edition, seeking approval until he insisted she didn't need permission. In the toy section, Emma finally showed genuine enthusiasm, her eyes brightening at an art kit containing paints, brushes, and a small easel. "Do you enjoy painting?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded eagerly. "Mom taught me." She explained that art helps express feelings when words aren't enough. Marcus added the art set to their cart without hesitation. "You inherited that talent from her. She was very gifted." "I remember," Emma said softly. "She sold paintings sometimes when money was scarce." Each casual revelation was another reminder of how different their worlds had been, his filled with luxury, theirs with careful budgeting. Now these realities were merging, with a 9-year-old girl caught between them. 5 days into their new arrangement, a fragile routine began emerging. Marcus had restructured his schedule significantly, delegating meetings and postponing business travel, actions that would have been inconceivable a week earlier. His executive staff was puzzled by the sudden changes, but he provided minimal explanations. The media hadn't yet discovered Emma's existence, and he intended to maintain that privacy as long as possible. Each morning, Marcus rose early, handled urgent correspondence, and then prepared a simple breakfast before Emma appeared from her room. Their meals were quiet, but the silence had begun feeling less strained. "I need to register you for school," Marcus mentioned over toast and scrambled eggs. The admissions counselor recommended several excellent options. Emma moved her eggs around her plate. "Do you miss school?" he asked, realizing he knew virtually nothing about her academic background. She shrugged. I like learning, but children sometimes ask questions when things are unusual. Marcus understood immediately. Questions about her mother, and now questions about suddenly living with a father who'd been absent for 9 years. We'll find somewhere excellent, he promised. Somewhere you'll feel accepted. That evening, as Marcus worked in his home office, a piercing scream shattered the quiet. He leaped from his chair and rushed to Emma's room, his heart racing. She was tossing in her sleep, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom," she cried out, "please don't leave." Marcus froze in the doorway, paralyzed by the raw anguish in her voice. This was beyond his expertise. Financial reports and market analysis couldn't help here. "Emma," he said softly, approaching her bed. "Emma, wake up. It's only a dream." Her eyes opened, confused and frightened. For a moment she seemed puzzled by his presence, as if expecting someone else. Then reality returned. "I'm sorry," she whispered, wiping tears with small fists. "Never apologize," Marcus said, sitting awkwardly on her bed's edge. "Nightmares are normal." She nodded, pulling her knees to her chest. The silence stretched between them until Marcus, with no idea what else to do, simply reached out and took her small hand in his. To his surprise, Emma didn't pull away. Her fingers wrapped around his, holding tight as if anchoring herself. They sat like that, connected by this simple touch, until her breathing steadied and her shoulders relaxed. "Would you like some water?" he asked finally. She shook her head. "Could you stay a bit longer?" So Marcus Thornfield, CEO of a multinational corporation, sat holding his daughter's hand until she fell back asleep. Business calls and profit margins forgotten. The next morning, Marcus discovered a drawing on his desk, a slightly imperfect but unmistakable portrait of him rendered in careful strokes of colored pencils. At the bottom, Emma had written, "Thank you for staying." The protective environment Marcus had created around their developing routine shattered on a Wednesday morning. His phone buzzed with urgent messages from his communications director. "Call immediately." "Story breaking about your daughter." Marcus's stomach plummeted. He'd known this moment would arrive, but had hoped for more time. Time for Emma to adjust. Time for him to learn how to protect her from inevitable public scrutiny. "Mr. Thornfield," his communications director said when he called, "the Business Herald is publishing a piece tomorrow. Tech mogul's hidden child revealed. They have photographs of you and Emma at the shopping center. We need an official response." Marcus glanced at Emma's closed bedroom door. She was preparing for her first day at Millbrook Academy, an exclusive private school where he hoped she might find stability. "Issue nothing," he instructed. "No confirmations, no denials. I'll manage this personally." When Emma emerged wearing her new uniform, navy blazer with the school emblem, pleated skirt, hair neatly styled, Marcus felt a surge of protectiveness, unlike anything he'd experienced. "You look very scholarly," he said, attempting lightness. She adjusted her collar nervously. "Is it normal to feel nervous?" The honest vulnerability of her question surprised him. In his world, admitting fear was forbidden, a weakness to be hidden at all costs. "Of course it's normal," he said. "New experiences are always a little frightening." During the car ride, he debated whether to warn her about the media coverage. Would preparation be better, or would it only increase her anxiety about the first day? "Emma," he began carefully, "there might be some public attention coming our way about you living with me." She looked up from her lap. "What kind of attention?" "Newspapers sometimes publish stories about me, about my business and personal life." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Because you're famous." "Because I'm wealthy," he corrected gently. "There's a distinction." When they arrived at Millbrook, Marcus walked her to the main building, aware of curious stares from other parents. By afternoon, the story had erupted. Marcus's security team reported photographers positioned outside both his office building and the penthouse. When he collected Emma from school, she climbed silently into the car. "How was your first day?" he asked. She stared out the window. "Ashley asked if it was true that you didn't want me until my great-aunt died." Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What did you tell her?" "I said I didn't know." Her voice was small. "Is it true?" The question hung between them, devastating in its simplicity. Traffic moved slowly around them as Marcus searched for appropriate words. "I wasn't aware of your existence," he finally said. "If I had known, everything would have been different." "How different?" she pressed. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and spoke from a place of honesty he rarely accessed. "I don't know, Emma, but I'm grateful you're here now." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was truthful. And in a world where appearances often mattered more than reality, perhaps that honesty was what they both needed most. "My name is Emma Mitchell." At least it was until recently when Mr. Thornfield, Marcus, said I could use his surname if I wanted. I told him I'd consider it. Mom would probably understand if I changed it. She always insisted that regardless of everything, he was still my father. I keep my special artwork hidden beneath my pillow. It's a drawing of Marcus and me holding hands, standing in front of this tall glass building where we live now. I worked really carefully on it, but I'm scared to show him. What if he doesn't appreciate it? Or worse, what if he pretends to like it because he feels obligated? Mrs. Anderson, my art instructor, says I have natural ability just like my mother. She mentioned this yesterday when I completed my painting for the exhibition. It's a lighthouse on a rocky shore, the same one Mom and I visited last summer before she became too weak to travel. She'd said the lighthouse reminded her of Marcus, standing tall and guiding others, but always somewhat separated from everything else. "Your painting shows remarkable emotional depth for someone your age," Mrs. Anderson commented, but I didn't tell her that I understand all about depth. When you watch someone you love fade away gradually each day, you learn about the most profound kinds of pain. I wonder if Marcus will leave too. Not the way Mom did. I understand that's different, but in his own way. He tries so earnestly sometimes, like when he makes breakfast or asks about my classes, but his phone is constantly ringing and his thoughts seem elsewhere. The night I had that terrible dream and interrupted his conference call, I saw something in his expression that frightened me, like I was a complication he didn't know how to resolve. Ashley asked me at school, today, if it was exciting having a billionaire father. I just shrugged. How do you explain that you'd give up all the fancy things just to have someone who genuinely wants you around? When that social worker visited, she asked if I was content here. I didn't know how to respond. There are moments when it feels like maybe this could work, like when Marcus reads to me or when he displayed my drawing of him. But then I remember how Mom used to say that Marcus loved his career more than anything else. And I see how he looks at his phone when it rings, like he's being pulled away from a temporary duty back to his real life. The Chicago trip worries me. Miss Janet is kind, but she's not family. After he leaves, will he realize life is simpler without a 9-year-old complicating everything? Mom always told me not to expect too much from him. He has his own journey, she'd say. But sometimes at night I still imagine what it would be like if he decided I was part of his journey too. Yesterday, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone about the Chicago trip. I understand the importance, he said, sounding frustrated. But the timing is challenging. Was he talking about me? Am I the challenge with his timing? Marcus sat in his office staring at the merger proposal that would establish Thornfield Industries as the leading force in global markets. The Chicago deal represented everything he'd strived for. international expansion, record profit margins, and the board position he'd pursued for years. There was just one complication. Finalizing the Mitchell deal would require his presence in Chicago for at least 4 weeks. 4 weeks away from Emma. Mr. Thornfield, Janet appeared in the doorway. The board is assembled in the conference room. Marcus nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. Has the school contacted us? Nothing today, Janet replied. She hesitated, then added, Emma's art exhibition is still scheduled for next Friday. Should I modify your calendar? The art exhibition? Emma had mentioned it only once, casually during breakfast. My painting was chosen for the student showcase. She hadn't asked if he would attend, hadn't emphasized the date or significance. It was as if she was shielding herself from possible disappointment. Keep it on the schedule, Marcus said firmly. In the boardroom, 12 expectant faces turned toward him as he entered. These were individuals who had known only the focused, uncompromising Marcus Thornfield, a man for whom personal matters were never factors in business decisions. Colleagues, he began, the Chicago acquisition. The presentation was flawless, the financial projections impeccable. Yet part of his mind remained in a school art room where a 9-year-old girl was painting with her mother's gift. The timeline demands immediate action, the CFO emphasized. We need you in Chicago by Monday for at least 4 weeks to personally oversee the integration. Monday. The art exhibition was Friday. Marcus could attend the showcase and still reach Chicago. But who would care for Emma during his absence? More importantly, what message would he send by departing so soon after promising to be there for her? Mr. Thornfield, is the timeline acceptable? The board chairman's voice interrupted his thoughts. The former Marcus would have agreed without hesitation. Business always took priority. But now, I need 48 hours, he said, surprising even himself. There are personal matters I must address. Confusion flickered across several faces. Marcus Thornfield never had personal matters. As he returned to his office, his assistant intercepted him. Mr. Thornfield, there's a visitor here to see you. He's quite persistent. The man waiting in his office stood as Marcus entered. Well-dressed, with sharp features and calculating eyes. David Harrison. The man introduced himself with a firm handshake. Sarah's cousin. Marcus's defenses immediately rose. I wasn't aware Sarah had a cousin. We weren't close, David admitted. Family disputes. But I'm here now because of my young relative. Emma, Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled. Precisely. I've come to discuss her future. David produced a folder of legal documents. I'm petitioning for custody. Marcus stared at David Harrison, fighting to maintain his composure as the custody petition's implications became clear. Sarah's cousin, a man who had shown no interest in his young relative until now, was suddenly claiming family rights. Let me understand this correctly, Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. You were absent during Sarah's illness. You didn't step forward when Catherine was caring for Emma. Yet now, when she's living with me, you suddenly decide to be the concerned cousin. David's expression remained impassive. Mr. Thornfield, I'm simply acting in Emma's best interests. Courts generally favor blood relatives, especially those with established family structures. My wife and I have 2 children. What parenting experience do you have beyond the past few weeks? The accusation stung because it contained truth. Marcus had been a father for less than 2 months. What right did he have to claim he knew what was best for Emma? But then he thought of her nightmares, her tentative smile, her artwork, the way she'd begun to trust him, cautiously and courageously. He thought of his promise, and all the promises he intended to keep in the years ahead. You may share her DNA, Marcus said quietly, but you are not her family. I am. After David left, Marcus's attorney was direct. This won't be simple. Their case has legitimacy from a conventional legal standpoint. Marcus checked his watch. The board was still waiting for his decision about Chicago. The art exhibition was a week away. The custody hearing would likely be scheduled soon. Everything was converging, simultaneously forcing him to define his priorities once and for all. That evening, he found Emma at the dining table, homework spread before her. She glanced up briefly as he entered, then returned to her mathematics problems. "How was school today?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Good. We had a test in history. I earned an A." "That's wonderful," Marcus said. "Emma, I need to discuss something with you." She set down her pencil, her expression immediately guarded. Marcus recognized the look. It was the same one he used when preparing for difficult negotiations. "There's a business matter in Chicago," he began. "It's crucial for the company." "You have to go," she finished for him, her voice carefully neutral. "It would be for about 4 weeks." Emma nodded, returning to her homework. "Okay. Janet would stay with you, or we could arrange—" "It's fine," she interrupted. "I understand." But her quick acceptance was worse than disappointment. It was resignation, the response of a child accustomed to adults prioritizing other commitments. "Your art exhibition is next Friday," Marcus said. "I've marked it on my calendar." Emma looked up, genuine surprise crossing her face before she carefully masked it. "You don't need to come." "It's not important." "It is to me," Marcus replied. For a fleeting moment, hope flashed in her eyes before experience tempered it. She shrugged and returned to her mathematics problems. There was something else he needed to tell her about David's custody claim, but he couldn't bring himself to add another burden to her small shoulders. Not yet. Later that night, Marcus stood at his office window, looking out at the city where he'd built his empire. For the first time, the gleaming towers and strategic mergers seemed empty accomplishments compared to the simple trust in a child's eyes. The Marcus Thornfield who had existed 2 months ago would never have questioned his path. But that man had never held his daughter's hand after a nightmare, or seen his own eyes looking back at him, asking silently, "Will you be different from the others who abandoned me?" Tomorrow he would need to give the board his decision about Chicago, and somehow he would need to find a way to fight for his daughter while still honoring the company he had built. Marcus stared at his computer screen, eyes stinging from exhaustion. The Chicago merger documents blurred before him as he tried to balance preparing for the most significant deal of his career while maintaining some presence for Emma. For days, he'd been living a divided existence. Corporate leader during business hours, uncertain father figure at night. The fragile balance shattered at 10:15 p.m. during a crucial video conference with Chicago investors. "Mr. Thornfield, regarding the compliance issues in Section 8. The investor's voice cut through the quiet of Marcus's home office. A sudden cry from down the hall interrupted him. Marcus froze, his attention immediately torn between the business opportunity, worth billions, and the sound of his daughter in distress. "Excuse me briefly," he said curtly, muting the call before rushing to Emma's room. She was sitting upright in bed, face streaked with tears, breathing in short gasps. "Another nightmare, Emma," he said softly, sitting beside her. "It's all right. You're safe." "She was there," Emma whispered. "Mom was there, and then she disappeared, and I couldn't find her anywhere." Marcus placed a hesitant hand on her shoulder, acutely aware of the call waiting for him, of the millions hanging in the balance. "It was just a dream." His earpiece buzzed insistently. The investors were getting impatient. "I need to finish a meeting," he said, already standing. "Try to go back to sleep. We'll talk in the morning." Emma's face fell, but she nodded. "I'm sorry I interrupted." "It's fine," Marcus replied, already distracted by the buzzing earpiece. "Just please try to stay in bed this time." The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. Emma's expression closed off, the brief vulnerability replaced by a careful blankness that was painfully familiar. It was his own defense mechanism reflected back at him. "I will," she said quietly, pulling the covers up. "Good night." Marcus returned to his call, forcing his attention back to merger terms and market projections. He secured the preliminary agreement, a victory that should have thrilled him. Instead, he felt hollow, the image of Emma's closed expression haunting him. The following days brought a subtle but unmistakable change. Emma was unfailingly polite, answering his questions with yes or no whenever possible, keeping conversation minimal. She stopped sharing small details about school, stopped showing him her drawings. The fragile connection they had built seemed to disintegrate, leaving them as strangers sharing a space. When the child welfare caseworker arrived for her scheduled visit, Marcus was caught off guard. "This is standard procedure," Mrs. Rodriguez explained, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. "I need to assess how Emma is adjusting and ensure the living situation remains appropriate." Marcus nodded, suddenly anxious in a way board meetings never made him feel. "Of course." Mrs. Rodriguez spoke with Emma privately, while Marcus waited in his office, pretending to work, but actually straining to hear their muffled conversation. "Mr. Thornfield," Mrs. Rodriguez said afterward, her expression professional but concerned. "Emma seems withdrawn. When I asked if she feels at home here, she couldn't give me a clear answer." Marcus's stomach clenched. "She's adjusting." "We both are." "I understand," Mrs. Rodriguez replied gently. "But children need stability and emotional availability. Your schedule appears extremely demanding, especially with this upcoming trip." "I'll be attending her art exhibition before I leave," Marcus said defensively. Mrs. Rodriguez made a note. "That's positive. However, I'm concerned about these 4 weeks away so early in your relationship. Have you considered that Emma might interpret this as abandonment, especially after losing her mother?" The question struck Marcus with unexpected force. He hadn't considered it that way. He'd been thinking of the trip as a business necessity, not as another loss for Emma. "I'll be video calling daily," he said. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Pocha?" "Thornfield, being a parent often means making difficult choices. Sometimes the right business decision isn't the right parenting decision." After she left, Marcus stood in the hallway outside Emma's room, listening to the silence. For the first time in his career, he wondered if success had come at too high a price, and if he was about to make the same mistake again. Marcus stood in the boardroom surrounded by expectant faces. The flight to Chicago was booked for Saturday morning. Contracts were prepared, and the entire future of Thornfield Industries hung in the balance. Everything was proceeding according to plan. "The board has called this emergency meeting," Chairman William Foster began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "to address concerns about the Chicago merger timeline." Marcus straightened his shoulders, already formulating his defense. He'd anticipated some resistance after requesting minor adjustments to accommodate Emma's art exhibition. "To be direct, Marcus," William continued, "several board members have expressed concern about your dedication to this merger, given your recent personal developments." A tense silence filled the room. Everyone present knew about Emma now. The story had appeared in every business magazine, complete with speculation about how Marcus's secret daughter might impact the company's future. "My commitment to Thornfield Industries remains unwavering," Marcus replied steadily. "The slight schedule modification doesn't compromise our strategic position." Thomas Webb, the most aggressive board member, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Marcus, This company wasn't built on schedule modifications. It was built on complete dedication and laser focus, qualities you've always demonstrated until recently. The implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus felt a familiar surge of defensive pride. These men had watched him sacrifice everything for this company. They expected nothing less. "What exactly are you implying, Thomas?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. "We're suggesting," William interjected, "that you need to clarify your priorities. Either commit completely to this merger, which means departing for Chicago tomorrow and remaining for the required 4 weeks, or perhaps consider a temporary step back from operations during this personal adjustment period." The ultimatum was delivered with corporate courtesy, but Marcus recognized it for what it was: a threat. Prove your loyalty or lose your authority. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. The school's number appeared on the screen. Marcus rarely answered calls during board meetings, but something, instinct perhaps, made him excuse himself. "Mr. Thornfield," the school counselor's voice was calm but concerned. "There's been a situation with Emma." She became very distressed during a family heritage project in class. "She's with me now, but she's asking for you." Marcus's chest tightened. "I'll be there immediately." He returned to the boardroom, already reaching for his suit jacket. "Gentlemen, I need to leave. Family emergency." Thomas scoffed audibly. "This is precisely what concerns us." Marcus paused at the door, something shifting fundamentally inside him. "This meeting is postponed until tomorrow. I'll have my decision for you then." 40 minutes later, Marcus was sitting in the school counselor's office, where Emma sat hunched in a chair, her small frame turned inward, eyes red from crying. "What happened?" he asked gently. The counselor explained. The class was creating family heritage presentations. When another student questioned why Emma was only including herself and her mother, a rather insensitive discussion followed about absent fathers and children in care. Marcus winced, imagining Emma facing those questions alone. "Can we go home?" Emma whispered, looking smaller than he'd ever seen her. Home. Not his penthouse or the apartment. Home. The significance wasn't lost on Marcus. The drive back was quiet until Emma finally spoke. "Are you upset that you had to leave work?" Marcus glanced at her, surprised. "No. Why would you think that?" She shrugged, looking out the window. "Mom said your career was the most important thing to you." The words stung because they had been accurate. For years nothing had mattered more than building his empire, proving himself, accumulating success and influence. "Things change, Emma," he said carefully. "People change." Back at the penthouse, Marcus made hot chocolate, something his own mother had done for him as a child. They sat together at the kitchen counter, an unlikely pair finding comfort in the simple ritual. "I didn't know what to include in my heritage presentation," Emma admitted, her fingers wrapped around her mug. "The other kids have grandparents and siblings and pets. I just had Mom, and now." Her voice trailed off, the unspoken loss hanging between them. "Now you have me," Marcus said softly. Emma looked up, studying him with those piercing green eyes so like his own. "For how long?" The question cut through all pretense, all corporate diplomatic language. This was the true negotiation, the one that actually mattered. "For as long as you need me," Marcus answered. "Forever, even if it means missing important business, opportunities." Emma's eyes widened. "Even then?" Marcus thought about the board meeting, the ultimatum, the Chicago deal, all the trappings of success he'd spent his life pursuing. Then he looked at this small, brave person who carried his blood and Sarah's spirit, who had already lost too much. "Yes," he said with certainty, "even then." That night after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus sat in his office staring at the framed drawing she had made of him, His phone buzzed repeatedly. Board members, investors, the Chicago team, all demanding answers, commitments, decisions. Janet appeared in the doorway. "The board is expecting your decision by morning," Marcus nodded. "I know." She hesitated, then continued with unusual candor. "I've worked with you for 8 years. I've never seen you hesitate on a business decision before." "I've never had a daughter before," he replied simply. Janet smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice, whatever it is." After she left, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed William's number. When the chairman answered, Marcus spoke with the same decisive tone he'd used to build his company. "I'll be attending my daughter's art exhibition on Friday. After that, I'll join the team in Chicago via video conference. My physical presence isn't essential for this merger to succeed, and you know it." There was a long pause before William replied. "The board won't be pleased." "Then they can remove me," Marcus said calmly. "But I suspect our shareholders would prefer a CEO who can adapt to obstacles rather than simply steamroll through them." He ended the call feeling lighter than he had in years. Tomorrow would bring consequences, perhaps severe ones. But tonight, Marcus Thornfield knew with absolute certainty that he had passed the real test. The next morning, as he prepared to face the board, his lawyer called with disturbing news. "David Harrison has expedited the custody hearing. It's scheduled for next Thursday, right before your Chicago trip. His filing claims your work commitments make you an unfit guardian." Marcus's jaw tightened. "He's been monitoring us." "It appears so." "The timing is strategic." "What are our chances?" His lawyer hesitated. "With your travel plans and the board conflicts, it doesn't look favorable." "Courts tend to favor stability and presence over financial resources." "Then I need to demonstrate both," Marcus said firmly. "I'll see you at the office in an hour." When he entered the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Without preamble, Marcus outlined his alternative plan. "I've restructured the Chicago merger team. Janet will lead on-site operations, while I maintain oversight via daily video conferences. The compliance issues will be handled by our legal team, with me joining remotely for critical negotiations." William's expression darkened. "This is highly unconventional." "So is my situation," Marcus replied evenly. "Gentlemen, I've never requested accommodation in 15 years of building this company. I'm requesting it now, not because I'm any less committed, but because I have a more important commitment to honor." "To a child you've known for less than 2 months," Thomas interjected. Marcus met his gaze steadily. "To my daughter, who has lost everyone else she's ever loved. To a promise I made that I would be different from those who abandoned her." The room fell silent. Finally, William spoke. "We'll consider your proposal and reconvene after the quarterly reports are filed." It wasn't approval, but it wasn't outright rejection either. Marcus would accept it for now. That afternoon, he arrived early at Millbrook Academy, slipping into the back of Emma's art class. She hadn't seen him yet, focused intently on the canvas before her. Her small hands moved with purpose, adding delicate strokes to her lighthouse painting. Mrs. Anderson noticed him and approached quietly. "She's quite gifted, Mr. Thornfield. Sarah would be proud." "I know," Marcus said softly. "I just wish I'd known sooner." "You're here now," the teacher replied. "That's what matters." When Emma finally spotted him, her eyes widened in surprise. "You came to my class." "I wanted to see you work," Marcus said simply. "Your mother was creating a masterpiece when I first met her, too." The smile that bloomed across Emma's face was worth every confrontation, every risk to his career. For the first time, Marcus understood what Sarah had known all along, that some things were worth sacrificing everything for. The courtroom felt sterile and intimidating as Marcus adjusted his tie and prepared for the most crucial negotiation of his life. Unlike the boardroom where he commanded absolute respect, here he was just another petitioner subject to the system's judgment. For 3 weeks, the custody battle had consumed every aspect of his existence. Board meetings were delegated. The Chicago merger proceeded without his direct involvement. And for the first time in Thornfield Industries history, Marcus had formally activated his emergency succession plan, naming Janet as acting CEO, while he focused solely on keeping Emma. "All rise," called the bailiff. As Judge Martinez entered the courtroom, Marcus stood, glancing at Emma, who sat with her court-appointed advocate in the front row. She looked tiny in her navy dress, her auburn hair pulled back neatly, her eyes wide as she absorbed the imposing environment. David Harrison and his wife presented a picture-perfect image of conventional family values. Their attorney wasted no time establishing their qualifications. "Your Honor, my clients have raised 2 successful children. They have a stable marriage, strong community connections, and a family home with room for Emma to flourish. Most importantly, they share blood ties with the child, ties that Mr. Thornfield does not and cannot claim." When David himself took the stand, he spoke with practiced sincerity. "We simply want what's best for our young relative. Mr. Thornfield is a businessman first and foremost. His lifestyle involves extensive travel, unpredictable hours, and a singular focus on corporate success that leaves little room for parenting." Marcus's attorney countered with evidence of the changes he'd made: the modified work schedule, the permanent guardianship petition, the education fund established in Emma's name. Yet Marcus could see doubt in the judge's eyes. When his turn came to testify, Marcus abandoned the carefully prepared statement his lawyers had crafted. Instead, he spoke directly from his heart. "Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend I'm a perfect father. 10 weeks ago, I didn't even know I had a daughter. I've made mistakes, plenty of them. I've been learning constantly every single day." He paused, gathering his thoughts. But there's something the Harrison family doesn't understand. Being a parent isn't about perfection. It's about choice. Every day since Emma came into my life, I've chosen her. I've chosen to be there for her nightmares, to learn which breakfast she prefers, to sit through children's movies I don't comprehend. Marcus turned slightly toward Emma, whose eyes never left his face. "I chose to attend her art exhibition instead of flying to Chicago for the biggest deal of my career. I chose to step back from running my company to fight for her in this courtroom. And if given the opportunity, I'll keep choosing her over business, over money, over everything, for the rest of my life." He turned back to the judge. "The Harrison family may share Emma's DNA, but they don't know that she sleeps with her mother's photograph beside her bed. They don't know that she hums when she paints, just like Sarah did. They don't know that she's courageous and compassionate, and wiser than most adults I know." His voice caught slightly. "They claim blood makes them family, but they weren't there when Sarah was dying. They weren't there when Emma had no one. I may have entered her life late, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." The courtroom fell silent when he finished. Even David looked uncomfortable. The pivotal moment came when Janet unexpectedly requested to testify. She presented a timeline documenting Marcus's transformation from the moment he'd received Emma's note through each subsequent choice he'd made to prioritize his daughter. "I've worked with Mr. Thornfield for 8 years, she concluded. "In that time, I've watched him build an empire with single-minded determination. But nothing, not closing billion-dollar deals or winning industry recognition, has ever made him as genuinely content as being Emma's father." When the judge called a brief recess to consider her ruling, Marcus knelt before Emma in the hallway. "No matter what happens," he promised, "we'll face it, together." For the first time since the custody battle began, Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. "I know," she whispered. When Judge Martinez returned, her expression gave nothing away. She reviewed her notes carefully before looking up. In matters of custody, this court must consider what arrangement best serves the child's interests, not the adults involved. Mr. Harrison presents a traditional family structure with stability and experience. Mr. Thornfield offers a newer relationship, but has demonstrated extraordinary commitment and adaptation. She paused, looking directly at Emma. Most compelling, however, is the clear preference expressed by Emma herself, and the bond that is clearly formed between her and Mr. Thornfield in a remarkably short time. This court hereby grants permanent custody to Marcus Thornfield, with the provision that Emma maintain contact with her extended family, including the Harrisons, should she wish to do so. The gavel fell with finality. Marcus felt Emma's small hand slip into his. Together, they had won more than a legal battle. They had won the right to become a family on their own terms. Marcus stood in the doorway of Emma's room, coffee mug in hand, watching as the morning sunlight streamed through curtains they had selected together. The space looked nothing like it had 4 months ago. Walls now painted a soft lavender, shelves filled with books and art supplies, a bulletin board covered with drawings and mementos. It was no longer just a room in his penthouse. It was Emma's sanctuary. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, sketching intently, her auburn hair falling across her face in a way that reminded him so much of Sarah, it made his chest ache. She hadn't noticed him yet, too absorbed in her creation. The past week since the court's ruling had brought a peace neither of them had experienced before. Judge Martinez had granted Marcus permanent custody, citing Emma's clear preference and the extraordinary commitment and adaptation Marcus had demonstrated. The Harrison family had retreated, humbled by the testimony and evidence of Marcus's devotion. "Morning, artist," Marcus said softly. Emma looked up, her face brightening. "I'm creating something for your office." "Another masterpiece for my collection," he smiled, entering the room. She nodded but kept the sketchbook angled away. "It's a surprise?" His phone buzzed in his pocket, the 5th time in the past hour. The board was eager for his full return. The Chicago merger was proceeding ahead of schedule, and investors were demanding reassurance that Thornfield Industries remained in capable hands. Marcus silenced the device without checking the message. "Pancakes," he suggested instead. "With strawberries?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Is there any other way?" In the kitchen, they moved with an easy rhythm that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier. Emma measured ingredients while Marcus heated the griddle. As they worked, he considered how profoundly his priorities had shifted. The corporate titan who once scheduled his life in 10-minute increments now happily spent an hour making irregularly shaped pancakes with a 9-year-old. The man who had demanded excellence from everyone around him now celebrated the beautiful chaos of family life. "Do you have important meetings today?" Emma asked carefully, dropping strawberries into the batter. Marcus flipped a pancake before answering. "Nothing that can't wait." "Because of me?" There was a hint of concern in her voice. Marcus turned to face her. "Because I've learned something, Emma." "Work will always be there. The company will survive if I take a morning off. But these moments, making breakfast with you, hearing about your day, watching you grow, these moments won't wait." Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Mom used to say, time is the most precious gift you can give someone." "Your mother was very wise," Marcus said gently. As they ate breakfast, Emma handed him a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you." Marcus opened it to find a carefully drawn family tree. Unlike the school assignment that had caused her so much distress, this one was different. At the top was Sarah, her name surrounded by small painted hearts. Below were Marcus and Emma, their names connected with intricately drawn branches. "It's beautiful," he said, tracing the lines with his finger. "Mrs. Anderson helped me. She said family trees can look however we want them to look." Emma pointed to a small inscription at the bottom. In the corner was a quote Marcus recognized from one of Sarah's letters, written in Emma's careful handwriting. "Love isn't found in grand gestures, but in daily choices." "I found it in her journal," Emma explained. "I think she would be happy now." Marcus felt the weight of those words. The forgiveness offered, the acceptance given, the family somehow formed despite everything. That afternoon, Marcus made the decision he'd been contemplating for weeks. He called a board meeting and announced his intention to restructure his role at Thornfield Industries. He would remain as chairman, providing strategic direction, but would step back from day-to-day operations to focus on being a father. "Some of you may see this as stepping down," he told the stunned board members. "I see it as stepping up into what truly matters." Later, as the sun began to set, Marcus and Emma stood on the balcony of their penthouse, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. "Do you miss working all the time?" Emma asked, leaning against the railing. Marcus considered the question. "I miss the predictability. Sometimes business problems have clear solutions. People are more complicated." "Like me?" she asked with a small smile. "Especially you," he teased gently, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But that's what makes it worthwhile." Emma's expression grew serious. "I miss Mom a lot sometimes." "I know," Marcus said softly. "I wish I'd been there sooner for both of you." "But you're here now," she replied simply. In that moment, Marcus Thornfield, who had spent decades building towers of glass and steel, accumulating wealth and influence, and believing those things defined success, finally understood what true prosperity meant. It wasn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts. It lived in pancake breakfasts and art projects and bedtime stories and small hands reaching for his, in second chances he hadn't deserved but had been given anyway. As Emma slipped her hand into his, Marcus looked out at the empire he had built, then down at the little girl who had changed everything. The choice between them was no choice at all. His greatest achievement would never be listed on any financial report or business magazine. It was standing right beside him, holding his hand, showing him what it meant to truly come home.